can remember vividly the day that I was attending, and it's been a while, a Minnesota Twins day game. And among the individuals I ended up chatting with and spending some time with was Flip Saunders. And the occasion was the draft was approaching, and the Wolves were debating who to pick number one overall. And at the time, a lot of the experts thought it would come down to two big men.
I remember.
Karl Anthony Towns was one. Who was the other?
Jahlil Okafor from Duke.
Okafor. And my recollection of that conversation was, and I don't know if he had either of them with him on that day. I don't recall. Or had just visited with either of them. But what I remember about that day was that he pretty much said they were all but decided on what they were going to do. And ultimately, the answer was Karl Anthony Towns. And by the way, would have been a disaster that we might, to this day, not understand the repercussions of if they would have taken Jahlil Okafor.
It's true.
Who I loved as a college player.
Same. Won a title with Duke and Tyus.
It was the classic case of you got to project what he's going to be at the pro level. And the answer was Okafor was limited. I don't even know how long he played, but he certainly had a very undistinguished professional career. I don't even recall who took him and how far he ended up sliding. You can double check from the draft.
He was drafted third by the Sixers.
Third by the number 3.
Yeah.
And nothing happened, did it?
No, he played until about 2021.
What was the most points he ever averaged in the National Basketball Association?
His rookie year, he averaged 17 and a half.
Respectable.
That dropped to 11.
Ooh.
Then 5 the next year. He ends up with the Nets for a year, 3 years, 2 years with the Pelicans, a little bit with the Pistons. And then he played one game for the Pacers a couple of years ago.
I bring all of this up because I think our old buddy Karl Anthony Towns deserves a hug. I really do. He is under siege in New York. He is under siege from Shaquille O'Neal. Every time something goes wrong for the, relatively speaking, struggling Knicks, he gets blamed for it. And I'm here to stand tall for Karl Anthony Towns. I'm looking at his stats. Came into the league then, his first year was 2015-16, correct?
Yes.
So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How many years is this now? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11? This is his 11th year, I think, in the league. So he's been around. That's double digits. And this year, allegedly as the second best player on a contending team, he is averaging the fewest shots of his entire career. 13.9 shots a game. His rookie year, he averaged 14.1. After that, it went 18, 14, 17, 18, 17 and a half, 16 and a half, 15, 15. Last year was 17 under the evil Tibbs. This year, he's at 14 shots a game. And I think he's getting way too much of the heat. Now, the Shaq comeback is, it's on you, man. You got to be meaner. You got to be more demanding of the ball. And maybe that is part of it, because we saw it here sometimes where it felt like Cat got lost, and there was this sense of, is he demanding enough of the ball? But I got to tell you, I mean, this is now his numbers this year are down a little bit in terms of shooting. But this is a career 52.1% shooter, A career 40% shooter from three, 7 feet. A career 84% shooter from the free throw line. A career 11.1 rebound guy. 3 assists. For his career, he's averaging 23 points, 22.8. So, I don't know what happens from here. I mean, I know we can't get him back, at least not right now, because we're past the trade deadline. But I'm confused about what has happened to him and why the head coach, and I'll give you another name, the point guard, does not do a better job making sure that Karl Anthony Towns gets his fair share of the offense. I mean, we all get it. Jalen Brunson is a ridiculous scorer, right? We all get all of that given his size, how little he is, his resourcefulness. But I don't understand why there's not a willingness on his part to say, I'm going to get this guy. I'm going to get my guy the ball. I'm just going to insist on it. Because if you have the ball in your hands as much as he does it as a point guard, don't you have some opportunity and responsibility to do exactly that?
You have a lot.
It's amazing to me how, and somebody just texted this, Luka gets ripped as a guy who dominates the ball too much, as talented as he is, as skilled as he is. Brunson does the same thing.
He does.
Constantly, and because he's such a good scorer, I guess he gets away with it, and they had a good year last year. They got some help from injury from some other teams, but they made a nice run. But I feel for our guy, Cat, who got ripped here too much. I think you and I used to talk about that. And I don't want to, again, let him off the hook completely, because Barkley said it. Maybe he's too nice a guy. Maybe that's part of Barkley was trying to defend him with Shaq to say, you are what you are.
Especially 11 years in.
11 years in, exactly right. That if that's your personality, that's kind of what you... And Shaq's comeback, I get, that's not good enough. Because you're so talented, there's got to be more to it. But I think that's letting the coach off the hook too much and letting the point guard off the hook too much. Because Karl Anthony Towns now, again, he's not a great defender. We know all that. But that's all the more reason. If you're going to have him on the court, you got to get him the ball.
You'd think Brunson would want him to have the ball. You'd think his teammates would want him to have the ball, given the numbers that you just laid out. He can make 35 points look so easy sometimes.
No question.
His three-point shooting.
Yes.
And I know everybody wanted him to post up more. And
correct.
He did that from time to time, but with how easily he gets the ball through the hoop at times, it doesn't make sense to me that you wouldn't feature him.
Well, I think if they implode in the playoffs, then he's gone. And maybe they'll be the team that says, all right, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put all our chips in to get Giannis.
Yeah.
And then he ends up back in the Midwest. And by the way, would it be now? How quickly are the expansion teams coming in?
I don't know.
We're not going to move to the East next year, are we?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think it's going to take a minute or two.
Might be a little bit. Yeah, exactly right. All the Wild do is win. Finch took one on the chin. Keeping Guardsy out of the Hall of Fame is a sin. Wolves in 5.
By the way, I looked at all the years of the High School League Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
My initial reaction was correct. There's no way I should be in that.
Why?
Team. I don't know. I mean, there's some huge names in there.
Well, in what way?
Well, like Joe Mauer's in there, of course.
How many state titles did he win?
He didn't, but he was the player of the year in 2 sports in high school.
Okay, well, yeah,
nationally.
I'm not saying I don't think that should
first ballot?
Eliminate you. You're not. Yeah, that's it.
Chris Wenke.
You're not first ballot. But none of it has to be. None of what they did after should matter.
I agree with that.
That's irrelevant.
Yeah,
it should be. It's not going to be with way too many people. Yeah, but look what he went on to be. That's not. It's what happened in high school.
Daryl Thompson. He was a great player, great football player. Obviously, Chrissy Wendell basically started girls hockey here.
Exactly
in the state.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of good coaches. You think I could put my sophomore basketball coaching record and my 3 years as Benilde varsity tennis coach in there? We won a couple of conference titles.
It's part of the record. Is it on the resume?
It is, yeah. If I had a resume, it would be on it.
Ben Goessling in 15. All right, I need some help.
I'll try to provide it. It's just me here.
I'm looking at a couple of headlines here. This is a story out of the Wall Street Journal. Iran's atomic program hasn't advanced significantly since the U.S. and Israel struck its 3 main nuclear sites last June, according to experts and diplomats. The appraisal, widely accepted by officials and researchers who study Iran's nuclear activities, comes as U.S. and Iranian officials prepare to hold talks on Thursday. That, of course, was yesterday. That could determine whether President Trump orders military action against the country. So here's a quote from David Albright, a former UN weapons inspector. Viewing the satellite imagery and monitoring the Iranian nuclear sites, we don't see any evidence that they are trying to reconstitute their nuclear weapons program. They are essentially on hold. Now, how do we square that with the comment from Steve Witkoff, described as the U.S.'s chief negotiator with Iran, that Iran is, quote, probably a week away from having industrial-grade bomb-making material? Because I could have sworn we either played sound or I quoted from the president after we bombed those sites not that long ago. And didn't he say totally wiped out? In fact, we wiped them out much worse than we even predicted we were going to wipe them out. All of their nuclear capabilities are destroyed, and they're gone for a long, 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 long time. We couldn't have done a better job, not just discouraging them, but eliminating the nuclear threat. And there were people at the time who said, well, not so fast, my friend. Are we sure about that? And they said, yeah, we are. We're 100% sure. But we have access to intel that you don't. So something's not adding up here. Either he was making it up then or they're making it up now. And I'm no friend to Iran. We've had, several guests over the years talking about the nature of that theocratic regime. It is evil. And we have stories that have been unable to be substantiated about the possibility that thousands and thousands of protesters were taken out, like killed, when we had all those signs of what was going on in the streets of Iran, back when the president said, help is on the way. So this isn't about saying nothing should be done. I don't think, once again, the president has done a particularly effective job of stating the case. Maybe that's the plan once we attack, which could be over the weekend, by the way. But this is an example of why people are skeptical at best of so much that comes out of the mouths of the people in this administration, starting with the president. He said it was like the greatest military operation in history. Do you have the quote?
In a speech in the hours after they took place, the attacks, Trump called the strikes he directed, quote, a spectacular military success, end quote, and said Iran's key enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
So again, now we don't know. Is this supposed to be about regime change? Is this about something else? Is there something that we're going to learn? I'll need some kind of explanation because doesn't this in effect say you guys were patting yourselves on the back a little bit too heavily back then? If in case if it's true that we're now in a position where we've got more military hardware and ships and missiles prepared in that direction than we ever have, I think, or in a long time. So I'll need an explanation on that. Locally, do you remember our judge, U.S. District Chief Judge Patrick Schultz?
Yeah.
Who was very demonstrative in his criticism with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and with the belief that the ball had been dropped on a number of significant cases. And I had to remind people who pushed back, who said, well, these judges are these activist judges. This is a judge who was appointed by George W. Bush. And so basically what happened is Schultz hammers the Minnesota's U.S. Attorney Daniel Rosen on these immigration cases, and Rosen responds very angrily and basically says, let me see if I can find the lawyers in my civil division didn't deserve it. This is about the previous Schultz order. He was very demonstrative in that regard. Well, the judge is back again, doubling down. He's going after the allegations from Rosen that the judge overstated the number of court violations that Rosen's attorneys have made in immigration cases. Originally, Schultz said that he found 96 violations among 74 immigration cases since the Trump administration deployed federal agents to Minnesota. Well, now he adds he's found 113 added orders in which ICE violated in 77 more cases beyond the other cases he mentioned. I think originally it was 97 orders in 66 cases. Now he says, well, not only do I disagree with you, I've found a bunch more. And I don't know if there's been a response to the response. I'm not exactly sure. The judges of this district writes, Schultz have been extraordinarily patient with the government attorneys, recognizing they've been put in an impossible position by Rosen and his superiors in the Department of Justice. And Schultz had noted in his previous order, acknowledged the struggle for civil attorneys and that the caseload has been part of the issue. Quote, what those attorneys didn't deserve was the administration sending 3,000 ICE agents to Minnesota to detain people without making any provision for handling the hundreds of lawsuits that were to follow, or were sure to follow, he says. So that gets back to what we said. Even if you are 100% in favor of this surge, get everybody. By God, that was the mandate. Do it. What you, as a righty, should be disappointed or angry about is, as we've talked about a couple of times, clearly the infrastructure to handle this many cases was not in place, which does what? It takes away from your best chance to reach your quotas. So I thought that was interesting. So the battle is ongoing. And I'm told by people who know that the Schultz admonitions, these don't happen every day. And again, this comes from a judge, a highly qualified judge with a great reputation, who was appointed by W. Bush, not by a not by Joe Biden, not by a hardcore lefty politician or former president. This is by W, for whatever that's worth. Bottom of the hour break, and we've got Ben Goessling to talk about what has become, amazingly, again, even today, the number one talker all week in Indianapolis, Indiana, and now beyond, right? It's
every time I turn on ESPN
are going to do at the quarterback position. What's the future of J.J. McCarthy? Maybe he can explain exactly why the entire league seems so fascinated and captivated by this story. Does that just mean there aren't enough other good ones? Or does that mean they know something is up? Where might this be going? If you have questions for Ben, Bradshaw and Brian, KFAN text line 64686. In fact, some questions for Ben already coming in. Stay tuned. questions for Ben Goessling. He joins us now via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. 64686 is, of course, as always, the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line. So you've survived another Indianapolis Combine. Is that correct?
I have. I think this was my 10th one down there. You lose track when you're in a world-class cosmopolitan hub for events, nightlife, business like Indianapolis. But yeah, I believe this was the 10th one that I've done this week. So always a fun week, and you don't sleep a ton, but it's always useful to go down there and just kind of connect with people and hear what's going on.
Well, it's a nightlife in Indy, downtown Indy. There's no chance that you're going to sleep a lot. You're going to go out and you're going to seize the day, right? I mean, you're going to do it responsibly, but you're going to do it. I think everybody understands that. What would you say, if anything has changed, the biggest change that you have observed in sort of the way the Combine does its business, or maybe the way the media does its business over the course of that 10-year span you say you've been going?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it has. I mean, there's subtle changes about, kind of where we're set up. It used to be that you would do everything right in the stadium, and the media room was almost like a airport where everybody was laid over and trying to just find a place to work. And now they've got most of the media stuff in the convention center, so you have more space to work, but it's a lot more. You're further away from the action, which is kind of generally how these things go, where you're probably not given quite as up close of a look at things as you used to get. So, I mean, that's been a change, but the general approach of it is you spend a lot of time walking the Indiana Convention Center, trying to see people who are popping in and out of meetings. The bars and the steakhouses, obviously, everybody kind of knows about in Indianapolis, and so a lot of the work is the official stuff is during the day, and then a lot of where you have conversations with people and can catch up and hear what's going on. A lot of that happens probably after 11 o'clock at night or so. So that part of it hasn't changed a lot. It's just more probably what the daytime, the official part of it that the NFL can control looks like, and then the rest of it is kind of up to you.
So it's been pretty much the same for the last couple of days. Every time either Guardsy and I look up at one of the screens, we see another panel on sometimes a 4-letter network, sometimes a 3-letter network, debating the future of J.J. McCarthy with the Minnesota Vikings. I feel like it became one of the dominant stories this week nationally. Do we have a theory on why that is? Is it there weren't enough other good ones and you just got to keep eating away at the one where you might get some traction? Or why has this become such a fascinating story, not just here, but around the country?
Yeah, it certainly had a lot of fodder. I think there's probably the backdrop of Sam Darnold in all of this, I think. And you're talking about a quarterback in J.J. McCarthy, obviously, that was in the spotlight in Michigan. People remember him from Michigan. People saw, the Vikings take a chance on him last year and try to bet on him being able to go right away with a veteran team. And people know that hasn't worked out. So, but it's probably not the only starting job. It's certainly not going to be the only starting job that is in question for 2026. So, yes, the degree of fascination with it is pretty high. And it was funny, the number of people I would talk to this week, the first topic of conversation was very rarely the fact that the Vikings don't have a general manager. It was what's going to happen at quarterback, where people are asking you that question, or you're talking with people and that the conversation just kind of inevitably goes to that. I was talking with one coach this week that we were talking about the quarterback stuff, and he kind of jokes, "Oh yeah, I forgot we still have to hire a GM," which is probably a testament to how much McCarthy and that question has dominated things, how important it is that they get it right. And I suppose also just the stability that Rob Brzezinski has brought to the equation, where it's like, okay, we're able to fill this. You're right. It's been all over TV. It's been a lot of conversations about it this week that I had got steered towards that. So, yeah, the level of fascination with it is quite high. There's no doubt about that.
Let me give you a name that came up yesterday late in the show. I don't remember who reported this. One of the national media jackals did, that Anthony Richardson was going to request a trade from the Colts, and that there might be some mutual interest between him and the Vikings because of some prior connections or interest in Richardson back when he was first drafted, and a couple of viral photos we've seen of the head coach hugging Richardson after a game. I said, I'm curious to get your view on this, because what I said is, regardless of how much or how fascinated or intrigued KOC might be about Richardson, as long as J.J. McCarthy is also here, I didn't think he wants two guys who are all about projecting, right, and all about maybe somewhere down the road figuring it out. That to me just didn't make a lot of sense. But what do you think?
Well, it's interesting because they certainly had a lot of intrigue with Anthony Richardson in that draft, to the point where I remember hearing from people at the time that they were thinking about the possibility of moving up for him. They liked three quarterbacks in that draft. Obviously, the first three that went in the first four picks were the ones that they thought were legitimately worth spending time on. It was Bryce Young, it was C.J. Stroud, it was Anthony Richardson, and Richardson went so quick that it wasn't really possible. They, at the time, I think they were intrigued by the talent. They understood that if you're going to draft him, your offense has to change the way you play. There were, I think, questions about, is he the type of leader that changes the entire makeup of the room? I mean, that was, I remember hearing that question at the time, and I think some of those things have come up in Indianapolis too. But yeah, they certainly were fascinated with what he can do and the athletic ability he brings. He had a great workout at the Combine, and I remember Kevin O'Connell, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah watching very intently. So there's certainly an awareness of the upside, and that was that conversation that I think they had after the Sunday night game in 24. Richardson had just gotten benched, and I think O'Connell pulled him aside to basically say, hey, man, you're still I think he said, you're still a bad dude, and you're going to play a long time in the league. So he was trying to encourage him there, and that obviously got a lot of attention. So some of these things come back because of that. But the tricky part of the fit is what you mentioned, that he is a project, and they already have a guy that I think is safe to classify as a project in some way.
Exactly.
In terms of how much seasoning J.J. McCarthy still needs. So it may not be the right timing for it to happen. I mean, maybe they still look at it. It'll depend on how much it would cost to get him. But I don't think you go into 2026 and say they get him, they get McCarthy, may the best man win. I think they need somebody, and I think they know they need somebody with more polish, with more stability than that. I mean, if you bring him in as kind of let's take a flyer on him and see what happens if it's cheap enough to do it, that's one thing. I don't think that could be the only solution.
No.
I would be very surprised if it goes that way.
I would too. Like I said, if McCarthy wasn't here, you know, what he seems to represent at this point, then I could see, all right, we want one person, we down the road, if we work with him, we think he could be really good, but you don't want two projects at various levels, I don't believe. Well, you know, one other interesting nugget to me regarding McCarthy is how much value, because there are some people who've said and even written, you know, let's not forget that McCarthy finished much better than he started the season. Obviously got hurt again, but finished much better than he started. But my counter to that would be, I got to believe that if the Vikings were putting a great deal of weight in that, we wouldn't be hearing all the things you guys have reported on, that they're in the market for a quarterback that they think can actually compete for the job. But it does raise interesting questions about whether we or they are not giving enough weight to how things finished. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a fair point, because he was better, and you'll hear Kevin O'Connell make mention of that a little, but I also think they know what the caveat. They had done a lot of things to simplify the offense or streamline it or whatever word you want to use. I don't think they like the phrase simplify, but Aaron Jones said, we had to dump some of it down. So whether it was that or the fact they weren't playing a lot of great defenses, I think you have to look at it and say this was a little bit of a snapshot that probably doesn't translate to an entire NFL season. And the fact that they have taken all of this into consideration and understand that there's still going to be more they have to do with the position does lend itself to your theory, where they know it's not the be-all, end-all. You can't do what I remember Rich Spielman doing in 2012, where Christian Ponder has a solid game against the Packers, and Adrian Peterson helps them get to the playoffs with 199 yards. And all we heard that whole offseason was, well, if he does what he did against the Packers, we're going to be off to the races, and he's going to be good to go. It's like that one game or, 5 from McCarthy, extrapolating that out. I don't think they are looking at it that way, where it's just, well, if we can convince everybody that it's going to be great, then we can, kind of peddle the narrative that everything's fine. I think they are more clear-eyed about it than that. The other piece of it that I heard a lot this week was there's an understanding that you have a lot of veteran players on this team that want to win. There are, I think, our coaches on this staff that are thinking about it the same way. And if you're coming back and saying, hey, we're just going to run it back, he's a year older, he's a year more experienced, everything's going to be fine, I think they know that that's probably a dishonest, little bit of a disingenuous way to talk about it with the people in your own locker room, including Justin Jefferson. I heard a lot of that this week, that there's a lot of gratitude for the way he approached it, and he was thoughtful about it. He admitted there was frustrations at times, but he saw the big picture. He was not pointing fingers. He was not throwing out of rooms. And I think everybody felt great about the leadership he provided through a tough year and the stability every single year. When he said it in year 7, and he wants to break records, he wants to win rings, I think there's an understanding of you have to do right by him as well. So I think a lot of this comes into that piece of it with McCarthy, where you can be encouraged by what you saw towards the end of the year, but there's a lot of caveats to the whole picture that I think they are considering, and it's wise for the rest of us to do as well.
Yeah, very true. Ben Goessling joining us, as he usually does every Friday here on the Fan. Lavelle is scheduled for about 5:30 this evening. Let me get to a text that came in early. This is from Adam in White Bear Lake. When you have Ben on, Dan, can you ask him what he thinks the Purple will do at the center position? Will they go after one of the free agent centers, look for one in the draft, or will they give Brandell a real look at center this offseason? Small sample size for him, but he looks serviceable to me when he filled in last year. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think with Brandell, they saw a little bit of it this year where he struggled with pass protection. You certainly saw it last year when he was playing guard. I think his best role is probably as a swing lineman, and they have to decide a little bit if they want to keep him at, I think it's, in the $4 million range or something like that. So, they want versatile linemen, and I think they value that position quite a bit, and that may be where he's at his best, but I don't know that you look at him as the center. The question then becomes, do you have that player on the roster? I mean, I think Michael Juergens, they've been optimistic about, but we've seen him struggle enough that I don't know that they're going to go into 2026 with him as the guy. Ryan Kelly, obviously there's cap questions. The health questions are even bigger with all of the concussions, and is he going to want to play again? I think all of that is going to play into the discussion with him too. So I would think they are looking for a center that's not on the roster at the moment. Whether that's free agency or the draft, I think free agency probably makes sense if you have a younger quarterback again, because you want what they hoped they would get in Ryan Kelly, where it's a little bit of stability, a guy that can help set protections, a guy that can kind of lead the young quarterback through it. So I think you want a veteran presence there, and if you take one, maybe it's a little more of a developmental pick, but I think there's certainly a need for that position, and I would expect that they're going to address it outside of the current roster, at least to some degree.
It would be, we talked about this, Garzi and I did on Enough Said tonight. It would be so much easier for this club, for this organization, if they just resigned themselves to the fact that we ain't that good. Let's throw them out there. Throw them out there 10 straight games and just see where it goes, because it doesn't matter. We'll win some of those. We might lose some of those, but we're not going anywhere. But I sense the problem they have there is they feel like they still have enough talent, and maybe more importantly, the Wilfs, I don't think, have ever shown any willingness to sign off on the notion that we might need a gap year.
Yeah, I mean, I think the cycle they've been in has been what you're describing, where there's not a lot of interest in bottoming out. There's not a lot of interest in whether it's letting people develop or saying we're going to be not that good, but the upside of that is you get draft picks out of it. I don't think there's been a ton of interest in going about it that way, which has meant you sign veteran players, you have an expensive roster, you have to focus a little more on the short term as a result. And I don't think that is necessarily going to change. I mean, maybe a new general manager would come in and have a different way of going about it. I think when Ryan Poles was talking to them about this job, I'm sure there were discussions about what's your vision, and if he's saying let's tear it down and make sure that we can be picking in the top 2 or 3 for a quarterback, I don't think the appetite for that has typically been there with this group. So I would be surprised if that changes, and then what you get as a result of that is there's always a level of development comes at a cost, because it does mean you're going to have a harder time winning games sometimes unless the guy develops quicker than you think. So, yeah, I do think that's all part of it, and I think it's a fair question about it. I mean, they've certainly faced that question before, and I remember talking to Mark Wilp at the owners' meeting a couple of years ago and said he didn't subscribe to the theory that you had to have the bottom-out year to come back up. I suppose that's true, and that was the year they ended up winning 14 games. They've been proven right in that sense. But for sustainable success, I do think you need young players that are under controllable contracts that develop and can contribute while they're still relatively cheap and still relatively young. And it is harder to get that nucleus of a roster if you're picking 18th than it is if you're picking 5th or 3rd or 1st. So, I mean, there is that trade-off, and I think everybody with the Vikings knows that, and that becomes a little trickier to do. But, yeah, there is that push and pull to the whole thing. There's no question about it.
Well, as a texter points out, too, part of the sticky wicket isn't just the Wilfs. It might be KOC, because he's got obviously this gaudy regular season record, even though there's been a lot of, sort of inconsistency between, not being able to do it 2 straight years, generally speaking. But then there's the no playoff victories, what they're coming off last year. So it's probably hard for him, too, to say, hey, I'm fine. I got years before they're going to get on my rear end if things don't go well. Yeah. And that may well even enter into the way he thinks about the quarterback position, even if in his heart of hearts he thinks the best thing to do long term would be to continue to try to suffer and grow with J.J. McCarthy.
The most interesting thing we heard him say this week was my thoughts about JJ, or my feelings about JJ. A lot of them haven't changed, but the timeline has.
Yeah.
I think when you hear him say the timeline has changed, a lot of that is about I'm heading into year 5. My window for let's build this thing from the ground up probably has expired. And, the old, I think Bud Grant told Kevin O'Connell this, kind of with his dry wit, but there's some truth to it, where he said, hey, don't win too fast. And because then that sets the ceiling, or that sets the floor higher when you're going to year 2. And then Kevin O'Connell, of course, has that season where they get outscored, but they still win the division, and they have a home playoff game. I mean, that changes the expectations pretty quickly. So we probably have passed the point where they could say, let's tear this thing down completely. Let's try to just bottom out, have a couple of years where we're not very good, accumulate draft picks, and then make a real run from there. I think that would be a tough thing to do for him at this point. And, yeah, I think part of the discussion of the timeline changing is that reality that you probably do need to put a playoff victory on your resume sooner than later. I don't know that I'm not going to sit here and say that I have any indication that this is a make or break year, but I think everybody's aware that when you're heading into this, playoff wins have been tough to come by for this ownership group in general, not just with Kevin O'Connell, but with Mike Zimmer, Brad Childers, Leslie Frazier, Mike Tice, whoever it's been. There is a little more urgency because people want playoff success. People want home playoff games, which means winning divisions. And if you haven't had those things, it becomes a little harder to pull back and say, let's look at this long term. Let's look at this developmentally. I do think a lot of those dynamics are in play. And I think Kevin O'Connell's comment about the timeline changing was kind of a glancing acknowledgement of that.
Vikings quarterback pecking order according to Dan Orlovsky in this order: Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins, Kyler Murray. Your thoughts?
I mean, I don't think I would put it in that order. I understand why he's saying that. Obviously, they had the flirtation with Aaron Rodgers last year. Kirk Cousins knows the offense. I mean, Kyler Murray, there would be an adaptation that have to happen there. He has not played in this type of an offense very much, although Drew Petzing probably had more similarities to the Vikings offense when he was calling, or at least coordinating the offense. I remember, I suppose he was calling plays because Jonathan Gannon was the defensive coach. But so he's had a little taste of that, but Kyler Murray has not played in the rhythm and timing-based offense that you hear Kevin O'Connell talk about all the time. And it would be interesting to see plays he could make on extending things and trying to find Justin Jefferson downfield. Certainly, DeAndre Hopkins put up massive numbers with Kyler Murray in Arizona. So it's interesting. I think I would put that as a little more of a possibility because he's a little younger, and it's probably a little easier to push him aside, so to speak, because it's not four-time MVP or a guy that has been in this locker room and has thrown more touchdown passes to Justin Jefferson than anybody else. There is that piece of this whole thing, as there was with Sam Darnold, where when they signed him initially, and he was not Sam Darnold that has won 28 games in the last 2 years and now has a Super Bowl ring. It was, this guy can get us through, but if he's not good, nobody's going to lament the fact that he's not playing if we want to move back to McCarthy. So Murray, I think, makes a little more sense than those two just because of the optics of the whole thing. There is reason to connect Rodgers and Cousins to the Vikings because of all of the familiarity and all of the equity that certainly Rodgers, Cousins to a lesser degree, but those guys have had long careers as starters. So if you wanted that, there's appeal to it overall. But I think Murray maybe makes a little more sense because of the youth, the relative youth, and the fact that there is not going to be the same kinds of complications if you felt like you wanted to go back to McCarthy as there might be with the other two.
We had at least the sense when Kwesi was in charge, or was the general manager, that he did a lot of deferring. He listened a lot to the head coach and to the defensive coordinator. And to a certain degree, I'm sure this happens in every organization. But the feeling was that maybe he did it more than is traditional. Has Brzezinski been in this new role long enough for you to get a sense on whether it's likely he goes the same, or that now that he's in charge that he might be a little bit more assertive and a little less willing to take that approach? What do you think on Brzezinski?
Yeah, I think it's going to be probably a little more of the former. I think he talked a lot this week about the importance of people being aligned and people being on the same page. And I think there was some of the, as you just find out more, some of the disconnect with Kwesi at times was, he would defer, but then there's also times where it seemed like he would kind of do what he wanted, and maybe not everybody was on the same page of it. So Rob does, if you get into the draft room and people disagree, he does kind of have that ability to make the tie-breaking vote or make the final decision. He talked about that this week. But I do think there's a realization that you want to make decisions that the scouts are on board with, that the head coach is on board with, certainly Brian Flores with the role he's played on the defensive construction that he's on board with. I think Rob looks at himself as a little more of the point guard than the guy who is a little more of the traditional point guard, the Magic, Stockton type rather than the Steph Curry type, I guess is probably the analogy I would use. I think he has more football chops than people probably give him credit for. I mean, he's been the top personnel executive or the top front office executive, I probably should say, at times during his tenure in Minnesota, and has been in a lot of meetings, a lot of scouting meetings over more than almost 3 decades with the team. So his football chops are not those of a typical cap guy. So everybody thinking that he's just an accountant that's not all that he brings to the table. But he also realizes that there's a bit of a facilitating role to this whole thing, and I think the way it seems is, I don't think we're headed back to Triangle of Authority days, but there's a little bit of that where the head coach probably has a little bigger voice. Brian Flores probably has a little bigger voice. So, there's probably going to be a little more of a group effort on some of these things that you might see from a traditional general manager, at least at this point.
Have a wonderful weekend. We'll chat next week. Thanks, Ben.
All right, sounds good. Thanks,
Appreciate
Dan.
you. Ben Goessling, of course, covers the Vikings and the National Football League for the Star Tribune and joins us weekly. Some people wondered whether Ben was sailing. Others thought he might have been taking a bath. I just think we had not the greatest signal, but I thought we would try to muck through it for the value that Mr. Goessling gives us each and every week. So I hope you could hang on to all of that. Somebody thought maybe he had Lavelle's cell phone.
May have.
That was the most common joke that was said over and over again, and I don't know that we can rule any of those things out. Top five?
You don't want me to pass the ball. You want me to shoot it.